Hello! Today I'm going to do a review of Disobedience by Naomi Alderman, which is a book I gave 5 stars to. So the book itself is about a woman called Ronit who finds out that her father has died. She left London, North London specifically, and has moved to New York and lives in New York and has a life there. And she finds out that her father died, who was the Rav of an Orthodox Jewish community in Hendon, has passed away. The book is then kind of about what happens after that and her going back home to deal with his things and a bit of her grief and her life. You know, we find out she left specifically on purpose this Orthodox community that she grew up in, but she also left behind some people. The book itself has a different font for when Ronit speaks. I don't know if you can see that, but that's Ronit speaking, and then there's this other text, this other font. But there's also two kinds of, because within the second font that I showed you, that also contains a more wider view of the community, as well as kind of thoughts on Judaism and particular Torah portions. So one of the things that it explores, for example, is Shabbat and what that means, and each chapter starts with a quote from the Talmud or the Torah or various Jewish teachings and texts and things. So it's a book really weighted in Judaism and books. You get the sense that the Rav, Ronit's dad, was steeped in Jewish book learning and wisdom in that sense. And then the other character on the cover is Esti, who Ronit left behind basically, and who clearly had a relationship with Ronit when they were young, which we only get glimpses of until a particular point. So I think I'll just talk briefly about how I felt so that people who haven't read the book can know, and then I think I'm going to talk more in detail as well, because I'd like to talk more in detail about what goes on in the book and why I liked it so much, I guess. In more general terms, I think this was a really interesting book for me to read right now, because I've sort of decided to convert to Judaism, and I've been really sure about it for at least the past 3 or so months, and it just feels like the right path for me. And so since making that decision, I've obviously also kind of been wanting to cultivate more Judaism in my life, and then obviously also because it's kind of a sad time to be doing some kind of conversion process, because you can't go to actual physical spaces and be in actual physical community with Jewish people. It's more important for me, I think, to be finding more things that are written down and stuff that deal with Judaism. Does that make sense? Because it's a bit lonely otherwise. But yeah, so this book, it's been, I've had it for a while, I've been wanting to read it for a while, but it's only now that I finally got to it when it feels even more meaningful to me to have read it. Because yeah, like I said in a video I just made about it, it is also about the shape of queer life and the shape of queer religious life, and I really liked that. I liked how it kind of explores different ways of being queer in the world. Because basically this was also kind of represented to me as a Jewish lesbian book, which, to some degree it is, but Ronit explicitly does not call herself a lesbian. She calls herself a lesbian basically to make some havoc at one point in a particular chapter, but she also then, to herself, and we obviously read her thought process, she literally says that's not me, it's never been me. And she's obviously a queer woman, it's extremely obvious, but yeah, she's not a lesbian. And I think in a way that positions her even more better to explore what life could look like and be for queer Jews. I gave this 5 stars. There were a couple comments that I didn't particularly like, and I don't think it is a perfect book, but for me reading it right now it just felt brilliant. And yeah, one of the comments that really stuck with me that I really did not like was there was this comment about Jewish people who hate Israel and putting them, categorizing that behaviour or that critique of Israel as being a self-hating Jew, which was just a lot to unpack. And it was just one comment, but I was I really don't think that's what's going on when people critique Israel for being a nation state that's violent. I think the writing kind of bridges a gap between very flowery stuff and completely kind of scientific writing, and I felt that bridge was quite nice. There were definitely times when I was oh, that's such a beautiful metaphor or a beautiful image in how you're thinking about things. Ultimately, I really enjoyed this, and I think if you kind of queer lit fic with religion as a key theme and grief as well, then I would really recommend this. Now I'm going to talk about it with spoilers, so please go away if you don't want to be spoiled. So yeah, I felt I couldn't really talk about Esti as a character in the non-spoilery section, because for me, I want to talk about explicitly what happens to her, because that feels really important to the story. Because I think the way that Esti makes her own choices ultimately and lives a life that I feel a lot of contemporary queer people would be what the fuck, that's not the life that you're supposed to lead. Because in the book, like, it's very clear that she's a lesbian, right? Like, Ronit explicitly is like, you like women, don't you? And she's like, yes. And you don't like men. And she's like, yeah, I don't like men. But she's married to a man and she has a baby with a man at the end. And, you know, that's also another reason why I really felt like this book was for me, because, yeah, she gets pregnant in it and I love that so much. I also found it quite stressful for her because I didn't know she would want the baby, but yeah. I also haven't seen the film, which I feel like is maybe important context for this, but I am going to watch it, but in a while, after like the book itself has sifted away from me, because I'm sure I'll be really disappointed in the film if I watch it like right now. Some other stuff I really enjoyed about it as well was the representation of David, actually, because what I felt like at its core, like I felt like it was a really wonderful queer story about Judaism, but I also felt like it was a really wonderful story about friendship, actually, and something that Ronit is said to have said as a kid, like, that really just stayed with me throughout the whole book. It was echoing in my head was, if one of us goes, we all go, and if none of us goes, we all stay. I can't quite remember the context of her saying that, but it's obviously a very symbolic context because she was the only one who left and David and Esti stayed behind, and like she kind of has to reckon with that, like that she was the one who said, if one of us goes, we all go, and if two of us stay, we all stay. Like, that she left, you know, she was the one who actually broke that, even though she was also the one who was like pushing for a kind of continuity and connection between the three of them. So within that, I felt like there was a really complicated and like soft representation of David, because like he isn't evil or anything, and in fact he's actually really lovely. I actually really liked him, which kind of surprised me because he's married to a lesbian who like clearly isn't having a good time but he's not the problem, and he's actually very loving. And then the other thing I liked about him as well is he has these headaches, and he can basically kind of see like people's auras almost. But the headache and the pain manifests in a colour, in like the colouring of the world, and so he'll describe these like reds and blues, and it like shattering his eye and the blue kind of getting painful and stuff like that. And he also even faints, especially when he's a teenager, I think, but they sometimes just come on. And it's cast as hearing God's voice in the world, which I actually don't think was like terrible or anything. I quite liked that. I think sometimes it can feel like chronic pain makes you feel more connected to God. The level of like, well, maybe you also could have some painkillers and that would be okay. And at the end he is taken by Ronit to see a doctor, so the implication is that he will get some kind of treatment potentially for them. Yeah, I just really like that, and I'm always gonna love kind of like pain and colour type stuff going hand in hand, and then also God. Okay, the last thing I think I wanted to talk about, especially because I think honestly that is what made me sob the most when I was finishing in the like last chapter or so. I literally like sobbed so hard multiple times. One of the reasons Ronit goes home basically is because she wants these candlesticks that were her mother's, that her mother would light on Shabbat. And Ronit's mother died when she was young, so it was just her and her dad. So obviously now that her dad's died, you know, she's really alone in her family in a way, even more than she was when she left. But it's also kind of like, I wouldn't say this is necessarily about a book where she grieves her dad. I don't know how much there is to grieve of him, like in her life, he's sort of already gone. But yeah, so back to the candlesticks. So she remembers them from her childhood, she remembers like seeing her mother light the candles, she remembers their weight, she remembers their beauty, she remembers like the shape and patterns on them, and they became really real to me as well. So throughout the whole book I was kind of like, I want her to get these candlesticks, like she just wants the fucking candlesticks. It does end up with her getting them, and they threaded through the story for me as a symbol of I'm gonna cry about it now, as a symbol of the pain of losing somebody that you love, but also the pleasure of finding somebody that you love even though you've lost them, and all of the kind of implications around that as yourself as well, and like wanting to be closer to your mother, wanting to be closer to yourself. I think it was very beautiful. I wasn't entirely sure if I was gonna like this one, because I did try to read The Power like a few years ago when it won the Bailey's Prize or whatever, and I didn't really like it. I just kind of DNF'd it. Like, it wasn't bad, I think I don't really know if I care about that story very much, but this really, yeah, this worked for me. This was actually published before it, but then it got a makeover after The Power did so well, presumably, so people can pick it out and be like, that's the same author. I do also feel like books that have things that I like grief and queerness, specifically like women, lesbianism, bisexuality, friendship and Judaism, like, and to some extent just like religion generally, you know, I would like all of those things, but I feel like this is more than just those things all together, you know, it's better than that for me. It's almost like a backwards coming of age story in a way. It's kind of like a re-coming of age, a reconnecting by remembering, by deciding to go away kind of coming of age. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on it if you've read it, and let me know if you want to pick it up now that you've seen me talk about it. and I will talk to you when I talk to you, I guess, the next time. Bye!